Hi, welcome to Pick Your Coaches podcast. My name is Akshay Virala. Pick Your Coach is an online one-to-one coaching app that helps you access certified coaches across sports. The podcast is my way of helping you understand how elite athletes get to where they are, their game plan, mindset, and preparation. Thanks for joining us today on Pick Your Coaches podcast. My guest today has played billiards at the national level, but has since moved on to helping sportsmen achieve their full potential. He's now one of the most sought after sports psychologists in India, and I'm very happy that he's taken the time to speak with us. So thanks, Shree. Thanks for being part of the Pick Your Coach podcast.
Thank you for having me, Akshay. It's an honor to be here.
Thanks so much. Shree, starting off obviously with what's going on in the world right now, and the need to be mentally strong is ever so important. What are your thoughts on this crisis, and what do you make of it, and what do you suggest to folks who are dealing with this crisis right now?
So we have to first understand. What is happening and what it is doing to human behavior at large. If you must have read about how in the West they were going crazy. Stocking up on toilet paper, and in India, to a certain extent, doing the same with sanitizers and maybe masks. These are just indicators of how weak we feel and how helpless we feel in these times. This virus is a new addition to the large list of ways we can face our mortality. And this is so new. It's a novel disease, and it looks like it may be here to stay. So the fact that there's no cure or vaccine yet has exposed our vulnerability, has made us realize how helpless we truly are. And this has thrown light onto one of our biggest fears, is that we lack control. Imagine living a life, Akshay, without any control over your life, If you were to just imagine it, it would feel terrible. And that is what this pandemic has exposed, or it has kind of revealed to us as to how little control we have over our lives. It is a very, very important lesson nonetheless, because we have to understand how little we do control. And the key to moving forward is to come to terms with it, accept the fact that we really don't have much control, and make the most of the little bit that we do have control over.
Sure. No, you hit the nail on the head by saying that we probably have no control right now. And that's a situation which a lot of us are in, because we have no idea when these things are going to end, when things are going to get back to normal, even if there is a cure for this, how a business is going to be run and how sports events are going to be held. All of that are things that is just hung in the balance there that we have no clue about. So
absolutely.
Moving on from that, obviously, speaking about how you've started helping sportsmen as well. So you obviously played snooker at the highest level and then moved on from playing professionally and getting to helping sports people. So a little bit about how that happened and what your focus is.
So I started the sport a little late, and I realized that by the time I finished my career in the junior category, which is the under 21s, I had to go into the big league and play with the big guys. And I felt I wasn't ready yet. I needed few more years. And since we had lost our father pretty early on, it was just mom and my brother Pankaj and me. So I decided that I had to kind of put my passion on hold. Pankaj also was playing, so I said, okay, if at least one of us is in the sport, maybe I need to start looking at ways to support the family. So I went to Australia and did my master's there, and somehow got into sales and sales training. I think I found my calling from there, and it has never stopped when it comes to helping people. And it was this one Christmas, 2006, when I was in India for a holiday. And Pankaj was getting ready to represent India in the billiards category of the Asian Games, which
Sure.
was to be held in Korea. And he was working on his game. And I thought maybe I could add a bit of value on the mental aspect, because sales and sports, having experience in both, I realized are very similar because you really only get one chance. And then I combined what I had learned in Australia and what I was training people on, combined it with my knowledge of billiards, and tailor made a kind of a mental strengthening program for Pankaj. And, he came back a couple of weeks later with the gold medal, his first in a quadrennial event. And we were over the moon, and he announced that it was his brother's mental guidance that really helped him secure that medal. And that got me thinking that maybe I've stumbled upon something here. It's quite prevalent in the West, but in India the scene was barely existing. So I thought, why not, in its nascent stages, move back from Australia after doing a 6-year stint and see if I can do something for my own countrymen and find a way to give back to sport. I was actively in sport. I thought maybe I could continue being in sport, but behind the scenes. So I
Sure.
came back, started working on my PhD with the US. And while I was doing my research for the doctorate, I was also working with a few athletes and collecting data and applying different mental strategies, which all got recorded as part of my doctorate. And it was an amazing journey ever since. I've worked with thousands of athletes over the last, this is my 15th year now, and I'm enjoying every minute of it.
Great. That's good to hear. Like you said, Shri, everyone across sports have started speaking about it a lot more. That's happened over the past few years, like you rightly said, and wasn't always considered the thing that anyone needs to focus on. And now you hear a lot of sports people talking about how the game is almost 70-80% mental rather than physical. And I was reading this book by Rudy Webster, the Think Like a Champion book.
Mm.
And then he spoke about that one story where he spoke about the Red Indian chief who tells his son they're two wolves fighting, and the things fighting in their head, saying one is good and one is bad. And he said, who's winning? And he said, whoever you
The one
feed.
you feel.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that resonates a lot with a lot of people. So people hear it in different ways, where you say, if you get in positive thoughts, that's what's going to help you, and negative thoughts. So like you said, across sports, everyone's starting to talk about it a lot more. And that must be a little heartening for you, that people have started to recognize how important mental health and being really mentally strong is.
Totally, Akshay. You know, it's not only sports people that come to me because I specialize in sport and performance psychology.
Mhm.
I work with people from the corporate world, businessmen and entrepreneurs, CEOs, homemakers, even anybody with a mind, right?
Sure.
And the challenges are the same. The area in which we want to excel in, they may vary. But for me, I just need any medium. So for me, sports is a medium to help develop the person. A business can be a medium. So it's fundamentally very, very similar. Yes, maybe about 20% is more catered to the specific field, be it sport or business or a job. But the process involves sometimes years of coaching and consulting to get the person to reflect, understand what their weaknesses are, what their strengths are, and start working on them. Sports people are amazing. For them, it's holistic. They have to challenge themselves physically, mentally, emotionally. And I believe sport is a spiritual experience. You have to really dig down deep and tap into your reserves sometimes to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. So you rightly said that it is 70, 80, maybe even 90% mental, because when you are under pressure, which is something you don't experience in practice, only in matches, when you are under pressure, the mind does not allow all that years of training, skill development, fitness to come forth, because pressure is this big block that is occupying every cell of your existence. And if that is not dealt with effectively, all your training goes out the window. It's no use. And that is why you see very often athletes playing really well in practice, but struggling, or
in the game.
I hate using this word, but choking
Yep.
in matches. So yes, definitely your mental game will determine your level of performance and level of success in matches. Most athletes are kings and queens in practice, so it's the competitive times that really matter.
Sure. And what would you say, and when rather, not what would you say, uh, would you think an aspiring sportsman or sportswoman would actually need to start seeing a sports psychologist? Do you think that they should do it as and when they start playing a game seriously, start training? So, if, for example, if they go to a reputed coach for a particular sport, do you think they have to simultaneously go to a sports psychologist or someone who's going to train their mind as well at the same time, or is it something which they can do later on?
Okay, so that's a very loaded question. I have a
All
lot of
right.
thoughts, so let me try and
Okay.
no, I just want to get my thoughts right in
Sure.
order. Starting with the coaches, I believe Indian coaches have a long way to go in terms of accepting that they are not the be all and end all of an athlete's development and progress.
Hmm.
They need to start understanding that their skill sets are limited to technical and tactical coaching. And many coaches I have seen, especially the old school ones, are very possessive about their athletes and want to be their fitness coach, psychologist, nutritionist, physiotherapist. They want to be all in one. And it's time that we start looking at sport in a much more professional way. As it is, India is 2 to 3 decades behind many parts of the sporting world when it comes to working on the mental side of the game. I truly believe now coaches need to start opening their minds up and start realizing that they need to work as a team with other specialists. Okay, coming back to your initial question about the age, I have a 7-year old golfer from Sri Lanka who approached me 2 years ago. So now he's almost 9.
Sure.
And his father was adamant that he started the process. And I said, 7-year old, what's the attention span going to be? I'm going to barely be able to hold him for 10 minutes.
Mm.
He's like, it doesn't matter. Here you go. He's yours. You work with him. I know he's going to be a world champion. So, you know what? Initially, there was resistance, but we've come a long way since. He's been winning tournaments left, right, and center, and he's been able to handle pressure really well. So, yes, my approach has to be simplified for that age category.
Hmm.
But I'm noticing that, yes, you can start with mental training early on, because as you start playing a sport, you start forming a lot of beliefs, a lot of preconceived notions, which go unchecked. Let's say you're playing a practice match. You've just started the sport 3, 6 months down the line. Your coach tells you, okay, you play against this other person, play, 3 sets. And if they lose, they start forming some beliefs or superstitions. And if these things are left as they are over years, they actually become huge mental blocks.
Sure.
So the earlier you send someone, the sooner we can either get rid of the blocks or stop them from developing. So yes, I feel 10 to 12 is a very good age, because by the time you are a teenager, 90% of your adult behavior is already established. So that's a good age to mold them to become high performing, productive adults.
Sure. So great. Actually, it leads up to my next question that I was lining up was when you said, how important a role do you think parents play in this? Because we've obviously heard stories. Everyone probably knows, or not everyone, but at least a lot of people know stories where parents pressurize their kids and push them to excel in a sport, in a sense where a lot of parents are living their dreams through their kids. So how do you speak to parents, such as the one you interacted with? How do you get them to?
So I worked with a state level junior cricketer a few years ago,
Mhm.
and his father told me there are a lot of mental issues with this guy. I said, okay, let me hear him out. After one session, I realized the mental issues lied with the dad. So I had to spend
Yeah.
more time with the father. And strangely, having spent more time with the dad than with the child, the dad made some adjustments and the child started scoring centuries. And
Awesome.
he's a very well known league player in KSCA League, and who's someone who I believe deserves to be in Ranji. But sometimes you have to work more with the parents, because I may have one type of language, with the athlete. We may have one type of understanding. I can create a certain environment, a psychological environment for them. But once they go back into their home environment with the parents talking a different language, one that includes pressure, expectation, some of them even, you know, uh, emotionally burden them with how much of a financial strain their sport is causing. And those are such detrimental and damaging ways to motivate a child in the name of motivation. That is, I feel sometimes the parents need a lot of guidance to bring out the best in their child. And tough love, in most cases, does not work. So that's the kind of role that we assume as specialists, because it's important to keep the parental relationship healthy with the child, and let us be the bad guys demanding from the athlete.
Sure. No, great. It's good to hear this because I think a lot of people need to hear this as well, given the pressures of being a sportsman. And I'm sure you've experienced it and you've seen so many of them come to you. So it's good to hear what.
Yes, if I can quote a couple of examples.
Sure.
So, so Michael Jordan, his dad was so encouraging, was so invested in his son's basketball, was had such a positive impact on him.
Mm-hmm.
That you could see that made such a big difference to the legend's career. In a personal example, firsthand, I can tell you that our mother, when Pankaj won a world title, I don't know when, this was many years ago, he called her from another country and said, "Mom, I won the world championship." And she's like, "Oh, okay, well done." And she put the phone down. And it kind of made him realize, hey, it's good to be on top of the world, literally, but not let it get to your head. She kind of put things in perspective for him, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it kind of helped me to stay grounded and be appreciative for every small little victory that we have. A parent's influence has and plays a massive role.
Sure. No, completely agree. And I can see how that works. I'm watching The Last Dance right now, seeing how Michael Jordan.
Exactly. And that's what, I was referring to that.
Yeah. So I'd see how that works. And also, like you said, when your mom said that to Pankaj, that also would have brought him back to what, yes, he's looked highly upon. Everyone looks up to him as one of India's best and one of the world's best snooker players. But then at home, he's still your mom's son and he's still your brother. So it's, I guess that's the part where he gets the humility from, saying that, okay, when I go back, I get the real deal from my mom and my brother rather than all the accolades I get from around the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So from a journey to being a mentally strong person, it is a process, Shree, and I'm sure you agree with that it's a process. But typically, what would it entail? Is it something that just keeps going up? You're going to have highs and lows. What kind of process is it? What can people expect when they actually go for any kind of counseling, when they actually come and meet someone like you? What are the expectations you set for them?
It's a form of education because we are taught everything in school, right? Or anywhere in life. We are taught how to read, taught how to ride a bike. We're taught how to play a sport. When you go to a job, you're trained in those specific skill sets that are required. But the one thing that nobody has really taught us is about the mind and how to utilize it. And that is the big gap that I've found worldwide, that this is something lacking in our own education. So I first get them to understand what the mind is all about. It's a very deep journey, very long journey, and get them to and I give them different examples, a lot of stories, a lot of anecdotes from other elite athletes that I've worked with, which are, of course, where I've been given permission to share. And it kind of helps them understand why the mind is the way it is. And I'm sure this question must have even crossed your mind, Akshay, as to why is the mind so naturally negative?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a mind boggler, because we know that the only way is to really be positive and be optimistic and believe in yourself. Why is that so hard to do? So once we start understanding that, we have evolutionary hardwiring, our ancestors' survival depended on constant vigilance. they're constantly looking out for threats from predators and wild animals. And because of that conditioning, it's been passed on from generation to generation. So we are born with fear and worry. We still look out for threats. If you're crossing a one-way street, we still look both ways. Of course, in India, you're justified, but anywhere in the world,
Yeah,
we would still do that.
yeah. Out here,
Um,
you just probably just need to figure it out and try and cross the road if you're lucky. So
if you're lucky, yeah. And so we keep looking at what can go wrong, but we never really look at the opportunities. A very good example is when people are stuck at the bottom of an escalator. I don't know, you must have seen these people in a mall where they're just standing there, just so scared to get on because what are they afraid of? Tripping, right?
yep,
So they're looking at that thin line that separates two big steps.
sure.
And while our safety is in that big step, which accounts for maybe 80, 90%, that 10, 20% or that little strip is what our focus is on. And that's what stops us from taking the next step. So can you imagine in life, the bigger challenges, it's so easy for us to look at what can go wrong, what the dangers are, but not look at what the opportunities are. This is called negativity bias. Those instincts from our ancestors are still with us, but now we're not worried about mammoths and saber-toothed tigers. Uh, we can approach a board meeting or a presentation or a sports match with as much fear and worry. So the conditions have changed, life has changed, but those negative instincts haven't. So to get an athlete or anybody who comes to me to understand this and then redo or re-engineer their mind and their programming is what takes many, many, many sessions and a few years.
Sure. No, so excellently that whole thing about the escalator is something I'm sure everyone has seen. And like you rightly
Mm.
said, there's 90% good there, but we're focusing on that 10% that may or may not happen. So yeah, so well put. Thanks for sharing that. And something you just said right now also resonated with my previous podcast with Mayank
Mm.
Agarwal. So I asked him that question, saying that he got tons of runs before he got selected for India. And the
Mm.
question I asked him was, you kept scoring year after year before you actually got selected, but every year when you scored that many runs and you didn't get selected, that's obviously going to bog you down. And I asked him, how do he keep motivating himself? And that's when he told me something which you just mentioned, saying that, hey, I can't control certain things. What I can control is what I'm
Mm.
going to do, getting runs and staying positive. And that's the thing that got me to where I was. I'll be a lot later than most people, international cricketers make their debut, but then it helped me stay positive. What I focused on is getting runs, more runs, and staying positive. So it resonates exactly what you're saying. So try and focus on the good stuff rather than
Yeah.
focusing
And I
on.
think Mayank, you know, it was okay that it got a little delayed because he had that sensational domestic season, becoming the highest run getter ever. And
Yeah,
he just kind of stamped his authority, telling the selectors, hey, you got to be kidding me. You
yeah,
cannot ignore me anymore.
correct.
And speaking of cricket, again, one more example I would like to give you. A lot of cricketers, I coach them and I tell them, so you also have played cricket, Akshay, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, I
I
did.
know your brother has.
Yes, I did for a bit. So I played state. That's it. So
Fantastic.
nothing more.
Oh, that's fine. It's something.
Yeah.
And so when you were batting, what do you normally look at when you before the delivery, before the bowler comes in? What are you turning around and looking at?
So you look typically at, I mean, I'm going back about 20 years, but then typically what I do is look at the field. And then my whole thing, I started doing that once I read a book by Mike Arthurton, where he said what he did to get him into that frame of mind while a bowler was approaching was watch the ball. I mean, it's something that you have to do. But
Yeah.
then I felt that when I kept saying that to myself in my head, it helped me concentrate a lot more. So that's what I did. And I know
Correct.
there are a whole bunch of other things people do. So again, from a cricket perspective, I know Dhoni used to sing a song to just get it and then focus back again. So many of the other great players have done all of that. So yeah, so I think different things work for different people, which I'm sure you also are there too.
Yeah, so exactly what you said. So watch the ball definitely, but even before the bowler starts his run up, whenever we see, even on television, right, the batsman is looking around before he gets into his
Done.
setup.
Yep.
And what many batsmen fail to do is they fail to look at the gaps. Most batsmen are looking at the fielders. And when you look at the fielders, right, they are your obstacles. Now, if you focus on the obstacles, you're actually attracting your attention to the obstacle. But if you look at the gaps, which are much larger than the fielder,
Mm-hmm.
you're already setting the direction of your mind to those gaps.
Yes.
So this is again, what are you looking at? What are you focusing on? Are you focusing on the negative or the positive? So same way, every athlete needs to look at the gaps rather than being psyched by the opponent.
Yeah. I should have come and spoken to you a lot earlier. Maybe I would have continued playing cricket. I've never thought of it that way, Shree, and that's something I'm not sure
Yeah.
many people think of it that way. Yes, like I said, people are looking at fielders, but you're saying look at the gaps in between those fielders rather than looking at those fielders. Yes, they're going to be that odd, great fielder who you'd probably be a little more wary about, but then there's still gaps there, and that's something they need to focus on.
Like, see, if I tell you, do not think about a pink elephant. Do not think about a pink elephant. Akshay, do not think about a pink elephant. What are you thinking about?
Pink elephant.
Exactly. And that's exactly the big mistake we're making when we are
Yep.
just looking at the fielders. We're only thinking about them. If you focus on the gaps, you're thinking about the gap.
Sure. So any
It's simple
any
as that.
yeah. So any sportsman, Shree, that when you look at them and you've probably not interacted with them, but someone who comes across as a mentally strong sports person, is there anyone that top of mind that comes to it, and what in their demeanor their attitude stands out for you?
So I've worked with PV Sindhu, Sai Praneeth, who was also a medalist in the World Championship last year.
Mhm.
Karun Nair, currently working with Robin Uthappa.
Mhm.
Pankaj, of course, is someone I believe is too strong mentally, very,
Mhm.
very strong. In fact, for those athletes who are listening to this and believe that technique is everything, let me tell you, Pankaj will debunk all those theories because he has one of the most unorthodox techniques. In fact, a technique that many coaches ask youngsters not to copy because it's so far from textbook.
Mhm.
But it's his mental application to situations where he does not doubt himself. He only looks at scoring opportunities, not how he can lose, but rather how he can make this his own. And this is without any bias. I would say that Pankaj is definitely very, very mentally tough. I love Robin's approach as well. Robin Uthappa, he's a very, very stable, very steady, and very deep as an individual. I think that we see that very often in his game too. Who else? Who else can we? I think MS Dhoni is a great example as well.
Yeah.
Nothing gets to him.
Yep.
He knows how to handle pressure. For him, he doesn't even feel the pressure. And even if there is pressure, he enjoys it. Even like Pankaj.
Yep.
Pankaj needs pressure to thrive. So if a match is guaranteed to give you pressure, then that's all Pankaj could ask for. Same
Sure.
with Dhoni.
Sure. No, that's what it is. How well these guys internalize that pressure. Like you said, Pankaj, he thrives on it, but it doesn't show because, especially in a game like snooker, you can't let it show as much. You probably miss a shot. You have that minute to go back and ponder upon it, and if you actually ponder on a miss, it's going to eat your head out, I guess.
Mm,
And so, I guess also internalizing and making sure you compartmentalize how you deal with that pressure is really important from your point of view as well.
yep, true.
So, for anyone who's starting off, who's playing a sport, who's getting serious about it, I know you've shared all of this where you've said this is the kind of age where you need to start talking about it. You need coaches to understand that they need to work in teams with everyone else. But other than that, is there any kind of advice you could give some of our listeners who are budding sportsmen or sportswomen on what they need to do if you had to give them? I know there's no quick tip and it's a long drawn
Yeah.
process, but then how do they take that first step, if I may say so?
So the first step is very crucial, like you said, Akshay, and the first step has to be establish that you are really passionate about what you're doing. Whether you're a businessman, you're doing a job, you're playing a sport, it does not matter. Only if what you're doing makes you happy will you really last and make a mark. I have not worked one day in the last 15 years, Akshay,
Mhm.
because I absolutely love what I do. So it is critical that the child enjoys doing what they're doing. And I have had so many athletes play one sport really seriously, like maybe at a state level or even national level, only to then switch to another sport because they found their calling in something else. So keep exploring is what I would say early on. I would love for parents to get their kids involved in sport, say around the age of 3 to 5, maybe. Let them try half a dozen sports. By the time they're 7, 8, you'll kind of figure out where their heart lies and give them all the support they can to really, really immerse themselves into it. And if it works out, if it's something that they want to take seriously, because not every child has the willingness to put in the hard yards, make the sacrifices, to go the distance, and make this a career option. So that is also something that needs to be identified. Many parents come to me wanting me to work with their child to kind of figure out where their motivation comes from, what their plans are with the sport. So a lot of my work sometimes involves concluding whether they are really, really committed to the whole process, because it is a very demanding field, professional sports. So give them the chance. Let them come and tell you if they want to continue doing this full time, which will also mean that they have two lives to lead, one as an athlete, but primarily one as a student. So that's why we have the phrase student athlete. And
Sure.
many athletes tend to forget this, that they're student first and athlete second. So for all those listening, please take your academics very seriously. You don't know whether your sport will pan out or not. We always obviously hope that it does for you, then great. But education is not only about getting a certificate or two, it is about developing your brain and tapping into different parts of it, making you a more well-rounded personality for the future. So please follow your heart. If you're playing sport, do it because you love it, not because what it can give you. And please continue studying because we all need it.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Shree. And it's your parting words were the exact same thing as what Mayank said. Follow your heart, and I think that's the message which we'd love to give
I
to
know
any.
it's very cliched, but it is the truth.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's not said as much to people who are aspiring to be sportsmen. And I think it's great that a person like you who works with elite athletes across is sharing that information, sharing a whole bunch of things today that will really help aspiring athletes and parents. You've spoken a lot about the role that parents play, and obviously from your perspective as a sports psychologist, where you can actually assist them as well. So thanks so much, Shree. Thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Thank you again.
Thanks, Akshay. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Have a
All
good
the
one.
best.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share. Pick your coach. Best coaches, no matter where.